Eddie, what's up, man?
What's going on? Good afternoon.
I,
Thank you for having me.
of course, of course. So, thank you for the favor. I know you just hopped off a flight, literally. Where are you coming
Yeah,
from?
I was in Peru.
Okay, is business or are you taking Eagle International? What's going on?
No. So the true story is, my girlfriend lives in Lima.
Okay,
I am Colombian. My girlfriend is Colombian, but thanks to Eagle Key Solutions, in the last 12 months, I've been to Lima 5 times, and I'm always working. People are like, "Man, you're on vacation." I'm like, "Dude, I'm on Wi-Fi. I'm working. I'm making my calls. I'm making my offers. I'm working. Doesn't matter where I'm at. If I have Wi-Fi, I'll be working, responding to emails, speaking to the team. So
it's
yeah,
the digital nomad culture.
amen,
Yeah,
amen. And that's the new American dream.
it is totally for me. I'm trying to figure out how to pull myself out of my actual business. But how was it intentional? Did you grow the business to where you could have that freedom, or is it something that happened organically that technology allowed you to do? Or
It definitely happened by choice. I I worked for and I'm we've had this conversation. I worked for a decade selling cars in the car business, and being always sheltered in that dealership, in that cage, I envisioned tailoring a life for myself where I had freedom, where I could work digitally. And I've been able to, little by little, put myself in a position where I could work from anywhere as long as I have over 100 megs of internet speed. That's like when I'm checking into an Airbnb, I'm like, hold up, I like the view, but how's the Wi Fi? Without the Wi Fi,
it,
it's meaningless to me.
yeah. So what was that aha moment in the dealership? You know, where is it like year 10, day 31? You come in, people are screaming, it's hot, and you're just like, this is not it. Well, what was the click?
Um, it definitely has to be within the first couple of months. I was at a Jeep dealership on Route 4 in Paramus, and I sold a Jeep Wrangler to a guy that worked at Goldman Sachs. And he was buying the car in cash, and I needed proof of funds. I didn't know what proof of funds was, but I was directed by my sales manager, go and get proof of funds so we know that he's got the money before he takes the car. And the guy logged into his Bank of America and he showed me a screenshot of his checking account. He had over 500K sitting liquid in his bank account. And I was like, man, how are you doing this? How is this possible? And he said, oh, a lot of my clients are in real estate. So I just, take a percentage of their wins and I'm able to make a good living. But it's because of real estate. And although I'm at Goldman Sachs, my specialty is real estate.
Interesting.
So
So it was the magic screenshot. I see.
yeah,
It's always, I find that it's always that outside influence. You get into kind of a cycle, you get into a routine, and then someone will just come from the outside and show you a different way of life almost.
yeah, definitely. And you have to pick up on those things. I always took it as they were signs from God showing me, hey man, there's a better way. You don't have to kill yourself 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. There's people out there living a dream, or living a life that you might seem like it's a dream. So I just found it as fire. I would take that as motivation.
and and
I took it as motivation.
and then what were, because people look at real estate sometimes, that it's just very sexy, right? And that we wake up in
Yeah.
the morning, we send 3 emails, and then we spend the rest of the time, either playing golf or shopping or hanging out, or it
Yeah.
can,
Or traveling.
or traveling, right? We're always, Instagramming the plates. But
Yeah.
what you already had a tremendous work ethic, right? When you were at the car dealership. So how did you take that and then transition that into kind of another path without skipping a beat? I know it took me 2 or 3 years to really start making real money in real estate, even when I was in sales. So what was that transition, and how did you keep your foot on the gas as you went from career to the to the second kind of the second act?
It definitely happened when I started getting more and more seasoned in the car business, and I was reading the credit reports and submitting those credit applications to the banks. So once I learned, my aha moment, I'll tell you, it was exactly when I read credit reports and a mortgage loan, a credit card, or a car loan. They all look the same on paper. They're all either you paid on time or you're not on time. How many on time payments do you have? So when I noticed that, hey, you got a mortgage here, which is an appreciating asset, and then you got cars which are depreciating. Excuse me, mortgages are appreciating assets, and cars are depreciating liabilities. So when I read that, a little light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, wow, it's really a matter of finding the people that have these assets and they're motivated to sell. So little by little, I started putting this whole big puzzle together. It didn't happen overnight, but my aha moment was reading credit reports and understanding that on paper, it's very simple. They don't, they're not overcomplicated. They're very, very simple. They're very easy to read if you have that, you know, that eye for it. But it comes with experience. If you're in the car business and you're constantly reading these credit reports, it becomes like a second nature. So I would see people with like, you know, a $50,000 open auto loan from, let's say, Ally or Wells Fargo. And then in my mind, I'm like, that's good credit. If I would see Santander or Capital One, that's kind of like, mid sixes, right? Mid six FICO score. And then I would see credit acceptance. I'm like, dude, that's a 450 credit score. That's 28% interest rate. So I started realizing that if they would have a credit acceptance and then I would see a mortgage that was behind, they might get a phone call from my VA like, hey, you want to sell your house? Are you going? You know what I'm saying? Like, I started doing that.
Ah,
So
okay.
that was my transition, and I was like, man, these people need help. At the end of the day, they all, you got to understand your client. Who at the end of the day are you marketing to? And I was able to put myself in that position by doing that.
So I got it. I got it. You were able to find your niche, but you found your client. Your client had a very specific profile, and it was the
Yes,
person who didn't have a ton of credit, but had a house as an asset, and that made them a candidate for sale.
correct.
Wow.
So let me also add this. When I was in the car business, I I grew a reputation for being very, very, very good at closing subprime buyers. Subprime buyers are people that have repos, repossessions, foreclosures, no credit, zeros. People that, for example, just came to the States and they have no credit. So those are the credit reports that I was looking at. I literally became a finance manager, and anybody that would come in that was a 599 or under, they were in my department. Those are the papers that I was receiving on my desk, and I was in charge of getting them approved.
Mhm.
So I learned creative finance, creative subprime. So that right there in my mind, I was like, bro, I could do the same, but with appreciating assets rather than depreciating liabilities.
Right.
So in my mind, I was like, okay, how do I maximize this? And little by little, I just started working away on the puzzle.
That's wild.
I'm I'm emailing a CO that I just received. So forgive me, but I have to send this out because I'm closing on Monday on this. So I got to get this out to the attorney to make sure that we put ourselves in position for this closing.
Good.
But done,
Perfect.
done.
Perfect. That's it. Business never stops. You can do
Never,
ever,
never.
ever. That's it. Yeah, yeah. It's great. It's great. It's interesting the way that you were open in your position to finding that opportunity. I talk and I get to mentor folks every now and then, and the one of the questions that comes up is, well, how do I get to the next level? And the answer is always start where you are. Right,
Yeah,
you're not waiting to go and jump into this different place or this different office. Where are the opportunities? Right where you're sitting right now, are you maximizing those opportunities? And I think that was the key. That was kind of the flip that
yeah.
allowed you to take it to the next level.
I owe everything to the car business. A lot of the sayings that I live by, I learned in the car business. At Eagle Key Solutions, we have very defined core values. And the first core value that we have is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. I learned that in the car business. And our core values, and I have to mention this because the minute that I implemented these by suggestion of one of my mentors, shout out to Carlos Reyes from Phoenix, Arizona, KITH, those are our core values. KITHED. K stands for KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. I is for integrity. T is for teamwork. H is for humility. E is for empathy driven. And D is for discipline. I live by these core values. I hire by these core values. And I fire by these core values. This makes it a lot simpler to run an operation where it's very, very complex, but it's very rewarding. And I have to say that I didn't make it here by myself. I got here with a lot of mentorship, and I was able to take whatever they gave me and ran with it. I also started in real estate with short sales. That was my
Hmm.
first mentor in real estate. Um, I learned how to do short sales back in 2015, 2016. That's when I started learning, but it clicked because as I was doing subprime auto loans, short sales go with subprime or with bad credit.
Interesting.
So anybody that is eligible for a short sale has bad credit because they're upside down on a property and they're more than likely going through financial distress where they can't afford the mortgage, where they're upside down, that's a car term, where they're underwater in the asset. So one thing just led to another and I kept adding up all of these clues and I just kept working and working and working and I didn't make money for a long time because I was working 6 days out of the week. You know, if in New Jersey car dealerships would have been open on Sundays, I would have worked Sundays. But thank God, by law, dealerships can't open on Sundays, so I had Sundays off.
Right.
But my days off, I worked to make sure that I had walkthroughs. And then on Sundays, I had more walkthroughs. So for 10 years, I literally worked almost 7 days a week, whether it was cars or houses. One or the other, I was grinding and I knew that one day it would pay off. And thank God I'm now living proof, knock on wood,
So
that everything was worth it.
wow, wow. So you started, just to kind of run it parallel. You figured out that real estate was a way out or was a lane very early on in your sales career,
Yeah.
and then just
Yeah. I
and kept both running until you had enough lane to kind of take off, or enough space, enough assets, enough dry powder, enough cash saved up to be able to say, okay, no more cars now. Now real estate is full time.
I'll tell you a funny story. It seems that way, but it really wasn't
Okay.
because we're creatures of habits.
Sure.
And I was afraid to leave the car business.
Oh, of course.
I I had a reputation for being a performer. I was selling, you know, for any car guy that might see this, I was selling 20 cars almost on average every month. But my per copy was about $3,000 when the average per copy is really about 800. So my averages were pretty solid. I say that to say the following. I was making a decent living by car industry standards. So I did not want to leave the car business unless it was on my terms. But what happened was I made a deal where I it was my first six-figure check, and that happened in March. And I went from selling almost 20 cars a month to selling like 6 cars a month. So at work at Lexus, they would tell me, "Dude, you're only here for the benefits," because they would see me that I'm making, you know, money in real estate. So my production decreased tremendously, and I was fired. So if I wouldn't have been fired, I wouldn't have pushed as hard as I did because I said, I'm not going back to the car business, man. Like, after I have the proof of concept, which is what we all need. Once you have the proof of concept, that's a huge milestone for anybody. So look for that proof of concept. And once you have that, go all in on that proof of concept. And once that happened, I made 200K after I had just made 100K. And that was 2 months apart. And if I wouldn't have been fired, I wouldn't have grinded as hard. So I have to thank the sales manager that fired me. I will forever be grateful to him. And if I ever see him, I'll hug him and I'll say thank you because of him. I found myself in a very lonely spot where it was it was scary, to be honest. It was scary because you don't have anybody to turn to and say, how do I do this? How do I do that? You're all on your own. But that's what happened. I wish that I could say I left on my own terms, but no, I was let go, and I was always like a typical Colombian. I was always late, but they would put up with me because I sold a lot of cars, and I was making them a lot of money, so they would put up with me. But as soon as our production went down, they're like, "Oh no,
Right.
you're done."
Right.
And that's really what happened. So to keep it real with you, keep it real with myself, that is exactly what
You,
happened.
you
So
you didn't jump, you were pushed, but it
100%.
but you made it work. There was no safety net. And sometimes what's the term, burn the boats, right? You had there was no
Yeah,
there's no
yeah.
there was nowhere else to
Cortez.
go. There was nowhere else to go. So you had to make it happen. And then you start to get creative. Then that's when you find that other gear.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I downshifted.
Right.
No safety net, like you said. And I, I, I always used to say that. Hernan Cortez, burn the boats, no looking back, only forward.
That's it.
100%.
That's it. How important was learning sales in
Oh,
your bit
dude.
in your business? Because a lot of it, and it's funny, I find a lot of entrepreneurs have, even if it's, selling something in college, or their first job, their first commission job, that they have that little bit of sales experience, and it's so important. It's so important. How important was it for you getting started in sales?
It was the best thing that I could have done.
Okay.
Without sales, I wouldn't be where I'm at. When it comes to learning the psychology of a buyer, learning the psychology of your end client, and being real with them, being able to gain their trust. You have to be empathetic. You have to understand what they're looking for. Without that, you don't have anything because you don't know exactly how to earn their business. If you don't put yourself in your buyer's shoes, in your seller's shoes, you don't know exactly how to earn their business. So you need to be the best salesperson with integrity, with honesty. I learned to not fast talk people, to just be direct, hit them between the eyes, but very honest, and say things that are going to set you apart from the competition. I learned to sell from a very, very early age, and that really made me different. I've worked in a lot of people know Goya. I work for their competitor. I work for Lafayette Foods.
Sure, I know
Um,
Lafayette. Yeah,
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 so I worked for Lafayette for a long time. I opened up a lot of stores for them in North Carolina back in like 2008,
interesting,
2007.
interesting.
Um, so I always sold, always, whether it was Lafayette Foods. I worked for Fancy Foods out of the Bronx.
Okay,
I worked for Cisco Foods out of Jersey City.
okay,
So I owe everything to sales. And sales is, we all know, it's a industry where there is no limit to your earning potential. And I love that. I love being able to have a challenge, and it it forged a tremendous grit in me. It made me who I am. So without sales, I wouldn't be personally where I'm at.
right. You get used to no. You get used to understanding what no means, and there's a level of soft skill that you get from sales and working sales on any level that it's hard to get otherwise. It's very difficult to get otherwise. You have a yeah
Exactly.
you have a situation where you have to close something or something's difficult to close, or someone comes in literally in the car literally kicking the tires, and you have to get them from looking to, yeah, I love this vehicle, I love this building, I love, I want to write you a check, and being able to create that interaction and foster that interaction and then be good at it and be trusted with other people's business is unbelievably important. And even you said something about earning business, and I feel like if someone works in a situation, or like call it a corporate situation, where the business and the transactions are given to them versus being in a sales situation where you have to find that business and earn that business, it's a very different process.
Yeah, yeah, much different. It's not only a lot more difficult, but it takes a special type of person to be willing and able to put themselves in a situation where they're going to get rejection
Yeah,
and they're going to be okay with it. And I look at no's as every no is getting me one step closer to that yes. So I love no's. I don't mind them. I just find a way to figure out if this particular person in real estate fits my buy box.
right, right. I What's it, Lanier Richardson? He's a famous real estate guy. He says I take them like vitamins, the no vitamins,
Like
right? It gives you such a tough skin,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
I think handling rejection is probably the one thing that people have difficulty with, no matter how smart they are or how ambitious they are. You know, the fear of someone telling you, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to write you a check, or no, I don't want to work on XYZ is a lot of people's barriers. And once you get past that, once you get past the embarrassment or the no, or someone yelling at you, especially if you're on the phone making dials, right? It's easy after that. It's
yeah.
easy. Yeah, yeah. You can kind of be agnostic to it. So you mentioned North Carolina. You mentioned the Bronx. Did you grow up in the city? Did you grow up in New York, or
I was born in Queens, New
okay,
York City,
okay,
but my parents met in the 80s in Connecticut.
okay?
They lived in Queens until I was 5. When I was 5 years old, they moved to Medellin, Colombia.
Beautiful.
So I grew up between Queens and Medellin.
How was that?
I'm a I'm a city baby.
Yeah.
I I feel comfortable in the jungle of in the concrete jungle. I feel comfortable
Right.
in urban areas. When I'm in the country, I could take it for a few days, but then I'm like, ugh, where's the hustle? Where's the I enjoy the hustle and bustle of the city.
Right.
I I also understand that, like the saying goes, only the strong survive. So growing up in this environment makes you understand that you have to be elite. You have to stand apart and be a person of value, and you have to, you know, be willing to test yourself against other people. There's a reason why everybody around the world comes to New York City, and that's for the opportunities, right? But at the same time, you got to understand that the competition is A plus. So if you are easily intimidated, you might not necessarily have the grit to put up with that. So it makes you tougher. And then again, Colombia in the early 90s, late 80s also forged a lot of strength in me because it was very violent, and I got used to seeing things that weren't very normal. To me, these things became just another day. I thought that everywhere else in the world, 10 and 11-year-olds were being driven by their chauffeurs that had other bodyguards in the car. That was normal to me when I was 10, 11 years old,
Mm.
School teachers, getting unalived because they were stealing their motorcycle, and these things to me was like, it's not normal, but it was like, it happens,
Well,
like,
New York was the same at that time. I grew
right,
up in the
right.
city. New York was, you know, you said the concrete jungle. The 80s and the 90s in New York were something else. Like
Yeah,
we see these kids, and they call them kids, right? I'm in my 40s, and they've got a chain on in the train station, and they've got nice clothes and sneakers. So it's like you you really couldn't do a lot of that. Not if you were
no,
alone. You definitely had a couple guys with you, and moving around New York at that time was super dangerous. And Times
yeah,
Square, which is Disneyland now, was not that way at all.
yeah, yeah,
At
yeah. It
all.
was a different kind of Disneyland back then.
100%. Right, right. And
Yeah,
then, and then you go to the boroughs, and I remember Brooklyn. Brooklyn was a wild place. There were some places
yeah,
you just didn't go in Brooklyn, and you look at Williamsburg, and it's the hipster paradise now, or
yeah.
Bushwick, and some of these other places, even Greenpoint,
Flatbush.
Flatbush. You weren't hanging out over there,
No,
not with the unless
I wasn't.
right unless you knew.
I wasn't.
We would go to the Bronx, and it'd be like five of us, 10 of us, 15 of us.
Yeah,
It wasn't you just walking along with your chain out, and very different. And I
yeah, and
that teaches you something,
yeah,
and it teaches you a level of survival, a level of grit, a level of
yes,
focus. You
tenacity.
get this sixth sense for bullshit, especially,
Hmm.
and it focuses you. It focuses you on a different level because it's in some cases real
Yeah,
danger, but then it's also there's a lot of people hustling around you. Every
exactly,
people trying to make a dollar, trying to get ahead, trying to survive. So you get this engine that living in a kind of soft, very comfortable place doesn't always get you.
exactly. And I think it has to be said. Back in the day, the kids that were wearing British Knights were a special kind of, like that's how New York City. I could say that I grew up. I'll never forget. For example, I was such a New York City baby that I would know at 4 years old if I crossed the bridge, I was in Jersey. And shout out to my cousin Karuna because she would always hide or put something over my head. So I wouldn't tell my father that I came to Jersey.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of keeping me at bay and making me think that I was still in Queens
Yeah.
as a baby.
Yeah.
And when you're a New York City baby, you understand that if you're crossing a bridge, you might be in a different borough. You might be in Manhattan or the Bronx or Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And I would remember these things now that I'm an adult. I would look back and I'd be like, man, that's so funny that they would literally tell me to duck and hide. And then all of a sudden I'm in Jersey and I wouldn't know because I didn't see that we crossed the bridge.
Right. 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 No, Karun is the best. Shout out to her. Shout out to her for making the introduction. Yeah.
100%.
No,
100%.
amazing, amazing. Yeah, and it's these different worlds that we kind of move into, and then take that. It's funny, you take the New York with you, and whether it's the accent or just kind of the way you move or the way you dress, you take that New York with you almost everywhere.
It's that pride. It's that East Coast. I've been to other parts of the world and that attitude, that confidence, that aura, it's unmatched. And I don't think that people really understand how competitive New York is. Like that's the Bronx over there, we don't mess with them. That's Brooklyn over there, we don't mess with them. You know, that's kind of like
Right,
how you grow up.
right,
Jersey, Jersey soft. Forget Jersey. Like that was the mentality as a child that I grew up with. And I understand it now that it has a lot to do with, in my mind, growing up and you're ignorant to better and bigger things in life,
sure,
but that makes your attitude, that makes you stand up out and it makes you more willing to take pain because you prepare yourself for a battle.
right, right.
So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, no, I'm super thankful for growing up in New York. What I noticed is when I got to Jersey, because I lived and worked in Jersey. I lived and worked in New York for a while. And then I was like, okay, I don't really want to sit in kind of one of these corporate offices in New York. Let me start my career in Jersey. I've been out there probably, close to 20 years. And I noticed our pace, or my pace, was different.
Hmm.
Like, you're coming into Jersey, it's a very different kind of community, and it's what I call a state of cities, right? Newark is very different from Jersey City. Jersey City is very different from Verona, from Montclair, from everything is each city is its own world. But
Yeah,
I that New York hustle allowed me to come out to Jersey and move very quickly and get to know everybody and get to know the lay of the land and get into deals and allowed me to move very quickly because I was on a different pace.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was I was
You out hustle people.
right, right, right. Not to say that Jersey's got its own set of monsters.
Oh
Yeah,
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 oh
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. There's guys doing tremendous numbers out there, and a lot of them I've met, and it's just different. It's just a different kind of moving and a different kind of hustle, a different kind of hustle. So now I started when I came to Jersey, I started in real estate sales. So I was doing investment sales for a while, then got into development and finance and advisory. How did I know you guys do wholesaling and you do it on a completely different level. How was that? How did you pick that niche specifically for call it residential wholesaling or getting into residential contracts and purchasing and flipping in residential
yeah.
versus you know I mean, you have tremendous drive, right? It could have been the real estate sales team, it could have been construction, it could have been something else. How did you pick that lane, that niche specifically?
Um, in my mind, it made sense because I didn't need a lot of money
Okay,
and I didn't need a lot of relationships. So
interesting.
I I found it to be possible to make significant money with very little money. So my mindset was only if I can provide value to a seller and I can make him happy and I could find an end buyer that is also willing and able to make this deal happen and everybody's happy, I can make a lot of money with a lot of freedom. So I wanted to get out of the car business to have freedom. And I wanted to make it possible by finding sellers that would be willing and able to sell to me that would allow me to make a decent living, but with good core values. So I liked the opportunity that I found in wholesaling because I was able to make a very good chunk of change with OPM using other people's money. So that's why I got into wholesaling. And then I got into learning how to double close, right? So the seller wouldn't feel any kind of way with me showing them what I'm actually doing. So then I learned how to actually close and go on the deed and then sell it on the same day. You know, doing a double close is really just what it sounds like. It's two closings, but your seller won't see your assignment fee on the HUD. And um, I got to also say this: my attorney, we would have like 30-minute conversations where he's trying to convince me stop doing double closes, just do a straight assignment. It's so much easier. You don't have to prepare two deeds. You know, you save money too. Eddie, please stop doing the double closes. And I said, fine, let's do it. And that almost backfired on me when I had an assignment for 60K and the seller was feeling some kind of way. My attorney calls me. He's like, look, I'm not trying to sound the alarm, but I want you to be aware that you might have to double close on this one. And I wanted to say, I told you, but I was like, you know what? He's telling me not to panic. He's been through enough transactions with me where he knows how to maneuver and make this happen. But he's like, Eddie, just call your lender, put yourself in position, and be ready to double close in case you have to double close because the seller is not happy with you making 60K. And I said, fine, no problem. That was on a Friday. Monday came and we were able to close smoothly. And I was able to get, I think it was like maybe 13% of the purchase price was my assignment fee. Purchase price was 450. We sold her for 510. So yeah, about 13% if I'm not mistaken when I did the math. But I got into it because it allows you to make significant money using other people's money. And when I started, I was broke. I mean, I'm still broke, but what I'm trying to say
We're,
is like,
we're all working guys, right? We're all working guys.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's wild how you being the underdog and not having the resources led you to be creative and focus on one place in particular. You couldn't get into doing something different. You didn't know anybody. You didn't have the money. You didn't have the experience. So you had to take this route and then were able to prosper. Well,
right, right.
yeah.
And my thing is when I would mention this to people that I grew up with and they were in real estate and I would try to explain to them what is wholesaling, they would always tell me, "Oh, that's illegal. You can't you can't do that." But I was already aware that if I get a seller to sign on the sales agreement, I have equitable interest in that sales agreement and I could assign it or double close it. Once I knew that, I was like, light bulb went off in my head. I was like, that's all I need, a signature. So I focused on getting sellers to sign for $500 EMD, for $1 EMD, whatever I could that I could afford. And once I started, just like I said, it's a big puzzle. But once I started putting the pieces together and putting the pieces in place, now I'm able to speak with a real estate broker, a real estate attorney, a title company, and I can explain to them how I operate. And they can respectfully say, okay, let's do that.
So I just want to put it on the podcast when you start the classes. We need rights to the classes. I want to help you develop the classes to teach folks, because I mean that's a tremendous way of conducting business. And there's always market opportunities, especially in real estate, market opportunities, market dislocations. There's always a spread somewhere, and it's a great way to do business, and you keep the markets going, like brokers. That movement in the markets, those comps keep these markets going. Now
Absolutely.
I know you're a dad. So family's huge to me. Family's huge to almost all the folks that I speak to. How much of that um first just really it just really motivated you to do what you do, and then how is being a father uh made you structure it in a way that you had that freedom, that you were able to get that time off.
Man, I get sentimental when I think about it because it's everything. When I started in the car business, I started in the winter in January. And because I was a new guy, I was sent out to clean all the cars when it snowed. So I was the guy freezing cold out here in the Northeast, cleaning the cars because I didn't have any car business experience. So I started from the very, very bottom. And I always, um, I want to say this as well. When I started in the car business, my daughter's mom was pregnant at the time, 6 months pregnant. I was let go from a job where I was making maybe 60K a year. Um, and it made me very, very, um, I was frightened because she was pregnant at the time. I had lost my health insurance and I had to now pay for Cobra, which was about Cobra is you might be aware. Of course, you're aware. Insurance when you lose your health
Sure.
insurance. So I had to pay like $2,000 a month, or I would have had to pay $10,000 for birth. So I wasn't making any money, and my unemployment was like $700, I think, a week. So I still had to pay for rent, still had to pay for the car, still had to pay for everything, and it was difficult. So my motivation, my driving force from the very beginning has been my daughter, and her name is Chloe. She's 10 years old now, about to be 11 in a week, not even on the 11th, so 5 days. But without that motivation, I would have never worked as hard as I did, or as consistent as I did. Without my daughter, I wouldn't have been motivated to make it in real estate. I wouldn't have, I don't think I would have been that motivated or that focused. So having her mom pregnant at the time and having to work, I was literally collecting unemployment. And before I got into the car business, I was doing delivery. I was doing pizza delivery. And then at night, I was working at a white cloth restaurant, Indian restaurant, selling, doing delivery there. So I was working delivery in the morning, delivery at night, trying to make $2,000 per week, counting the 700 from unemployment. And I thought, that was the only way. And let me share this so I could laugh, but I want to put this on the tape. I got into the car business because at the restaurant where I worked, the guys from the dealership would come every night, suited, looking nice, smelling good, and they would drop $100, $200 a night. And they were like, you know, constantly there. So me doing deliveries, smelling like food, thinking that this is the only way to make it, I would approach them and I would say, guys, how the hell can you afford to come and spend $100, $200, you know, per night? And they're like, oh, we sell cars. You get started first year, you can make 100K. Can you sell? And I was like, I will outsell all of you guys. You have no idea who you're talking to. And they were like, yeah, let's see what you got. Come over and apply. And that's how I got into the car business because I saw these guys from the car dealership suited up. looking nice, coming to the restaurant at the bar, and that's my story. So my daughter is the reason why I got into real estate, into the car business. That was the motivation. That was the driving force.
Brother, what a story.
Yeah,
And it
that's
and it just all
yeah. Snowball effect,
snowball. Yeah. When
levels, just
when
phases. You know,
when one thing happens, then another thing happens, and another thing happens, and you turn around and you're here. This
that's why I'm a firm believer that you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and be honest with yourself. You can lie to whoever you want, but you can't lie to yourself.
it's 100% correct. 100% correct. Eddie, wow. This is great. I can't wait for the book. I
Yeah, man. No, no. Thanks,
write
man.
the story. Write the story.
Yeah, for real.
Hopefully,
That's why I had to share that.
hopefully this will help. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. It's it's we work for hard for ourselves, but then when there's someone else, it takes you. It's another gear. It's another
Yeah,
gear. We're so selfless, and then constantly what I noticed is that even when it's tough for you, and this is to your credit, you make a way. You found a way each time. Each time you found a way.
it's that hustler mentality from being a New York City baby and just knowing that nobody's gonna come and save me, man. I'm out here on my own, and if I don't want to live with these circumstances, it's up to me and only me to make a difference. Nobody's gonna do anything for me.
Zero.
So at the end of the day, I gotta wake up. You know, I went from working 12 hours a day to working like 20 hours a day because now I work even more.
Right.
But at the same time, I could say that I could, you know, work from wherever. I have that freedom of location, which I worked for so hard because in the dealership, 10 years of my life, I felt like a canary. I felt like I was caged up. And that's how dealerships are designed. They're designed to feel like a cage. They're designed for you to go in and now you're in the lion's den. So when you get used to that mentality of always being caged up, I was so eager to get out and actually enjoy a summer, and enjoy a Saturday. To me, a Saturday was like work, from 9 a.m. to 7 or 8 p.m. And I know a lot of guys, and my respect to them, they've been there for 20, 30 years, and I respect them. I admire them, but I didn't want to be like them. And I wish that they would get into real estate so they could see a different life because it's possible, but you have to believe in yourself. And if you don't, nobody is.
Right. Eddie. Thank you, man. Where can the people find you? Eagle Key Solutions.
Eagle Key Solutions, we're out of Bergen County, New Jersey. I'm very easy to find. You can find me on Instagram, Eddie.Bryant, EDDIE, BRIANT, Eddie at EagleKeySolutions.com. I'm local. I I love people. I love surrounding myself with like-minded people, people that have values, that have integrity. And please, anybody that sees this, believe in yourself, have the motivation to better yourself, and help me get better. Iron sharpens iron. So please come around and let's level up. I'm here for everybody. I have a purpose, which is my family. And I don't want to go down in history as somebody that kept all of this information to myself. I want to give back. I honestly get a huge thrill from seeing people rise up. And I genuinely like helping people. So I'm easily found, easy to approach. and I'm here for everybody.
Eddie, you're the man. You're the man, brother. Thank you. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's an amazing story. We're gonna make sure it gets as much push as possible because this is the American dream, right?
One hundred percent.
Not only is it the American dream, but it's the beautiful thing about real estate where you can go from cleaning ice off of cars to hopping on a plane and having a digital business. This is beautiful. This is beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. I just spent the last 2 weeks in Peru, and I literally closed on a deal while I was there. So real estate can change your life, and you could get these wires worldwide.
That you're gonna help me with. I need a vacation. I need some time away. I need some time away,
Let's do it.
brother.
You
Thank
know I'm here, man.
brother. Thank you so much. I'll make sure your information's available. But thank you for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
I genuinely mean that, and happy to be here.
okay,
Thank you.
Eddie. Take care, man. Bye, guys.